We're going to begin at Luke 14:1. And it came to pass, as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, that they watched him. And behold, there was a certain man before him, which had dropsy. And Jesus answering spake unto the lawyers, the Pharisees, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And they held their peace. And he took the guy, and he healed him, and let him go. And answered them, saying, Which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen in a pit, and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day? They could not answer him again to these things. Number one, it was the Sabbath day. He went into the Pharisee's house to eat bread. There was a person there and he was among the lawyers and the Pharisees. So number one, it says, it came to pass, and he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day. And they just observed him, okay? There was a man there who was crippled, you could say, who had a physical defect, and Jesus said to the lawyers and to the Pharisees, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? No one said a word, right? Now remember, these guys, these Pharisees and lawyers, they were Pharisees and lawyers over the Word of God. I hope you guys understand that. Not just lawyers like today, right? But lawyers over the Word of God. And they held their peace, and Jesus took and healed him and let him go. And he answered and he said this, Which of you shall have an animal, right? He's saying, which one of you would have an animal that fell in a pit, and you would not assist him right away? You'd not pull him out right away on the Sabbath day. Would you let that animal die? And they could not answer him again to these things, it says. He continues, and he put forth a parable to those which were bidden. When he marked how they chose out of the chief rooms, saying unto them, Who art thou bidden of any man to a wedding? Sit not down in the highest room, lest more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. And he had that bade thee, and him come and say to thee, Give this man place. And thou begin with the shame to take the lowest room. In other words, let the more important guy come in. Give him the higher place, right? It says, But when thou art bidden, when you're called, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, when the one who invited you arrives, he may say unto you, Friend, go up higher. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Now I'm going to pause right here. This is the first half of this conversation. To understand this parable, Jesus put forth a parable to those which were bidden, right? When he marked how they would choose out of the chief rooms, out of the best rooms, saying to them, when you're called, bidden means called, of any man to a wedding, when you're called or invited to a wedding, he says, when thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room. Don't take the best place, lest a more honorable person than you come, right, and cause you to sit in a lower place. That's what he's saying in Luke 14:8, 14:9. And he that bade thee, 14:9 says, and he that bade thee come in and say to thee, give this man place. And thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. Hear this, folks. When you're invited, he's saying when you're invited to a wedding, don't come in and take the highest position. Don't do it. Because the same one that invited you is going to invite somebody with higher qualifications, and then he's going to say to that person, that one of higher qualification is going to say, you go and take the lower room and let me take this place. I'm qualified for it. Why is he saying this? It's an unending cycle. That's why. That's why. Now, folks, bear with me. So Jesus is saying, if you're called to something and you take the highest position, maybe you think you're worthy of that position, so you take the position that you believe suits you. Jesus says, don't do it. Because somebody who believes that they're qualified for that position, that placement, that place where you're seated, they're going to tell you, they're going to come with better qualifications than you and tell you go and take the lower position, but you'll have to get up and go with shame. Conceding with shame, right? That's what that word is used there, shame. Conceding and go to a lower position. But then somebody higher than that person will walk in and do the same thing to him. Now that person has been dethroned, has been put down. Then somebody else walks in and that person has been put down. And so what this causes is a never-ending cycle of people being put down, which causes a yo-yo syndrome of these negative emotions that people do indeed suffer with this very day. If you're down and out, depressed, you feel you haven't met some sort of a standard, there's a reason for that. There's a reason you're discouraged. And we're going to hit the central point of this. Now, I can already tell you that any type darkness does not want you to get this, because if you get this, the burden will lift almost immediately, no matter what your problem is. It doesn't matter what the problem is. The burden will lift. But it begins like this. I want you guys to see this. If you come in, right, whenever you join something, if you join into a conversation, you know how people have a conversation, a family conversation, all of a sudden somebody comes in with greater knowledge, and they speak that greater knowledge, and then because you don't have the greater knowledge, you often may be quiet because maybe they go into areas you're not aware of, and it does not feel good when that happens. That's when you're dethroned from whatever you were running at the time. But then somebody else comes in and does the same to that person. Then somebody else comes in and does the same to that person. Before you know it, everybody has put everybody down. Now in this setting, if this happens, then everybody's looking at everybody negatively, because they were put down. And the Lord is saying, stay away from such things. Now, believe it or not, that's a lifestyle that the world teaches you to live by, because they teach you the opposite of what the Word does. They tell you to take the position you're qualified for. They say, hey, you deserve it. You go get the best. In fact, before a person is saved, you know what they always say? I deserve better. How many times have you heard that in movies? How many times have you repeated that yourselves? You repeated that. You didn't invent the phrase. You repeated what you heard somebody else say. How many times did we actually believe in our hearts? Well, we probably did not believe it in our hearts. We echoed it, because no saint of the living God is ever really going to believe that. They will copy somebody else's phrase, but they have no belief of that phrase in their hearts. But they'll say, I deserve better. They try to talk themselves into believing that. I deserve better, right? That's what the world teaches. But the Lord is saying, don't ever join anything like that. Come and take the lowest position, and you'll be exalted. Now, the Lord is saying that both about himself, because we know what the wedding is, don't we? We know what the wedding is. When you come into the fold of Christ, do the exact same thing. Listen to me, this is a spiritual principle and a practical principle. It should be done both in your life, with everything you do, and I'm telling you now, it works with everything you do. And to apply that spiritually as well, with your brothers and your sisters. That goes for interactions with your families. Because if you do this, you break the back of a spirit that will piggyback every Christian it can. Yep, that means there's a spirit with you right now. And it's trying to piggyback. It's trying to walk along with you everywhere you go in life. It's there. Make no mistake about it. It is the spirit that bolsters pride, that will cause you, it will speak to you when you're talking to somebody else. You get into a conversation, and maybe there's a mistake in their statement or a mistake in yours. This spirit will speak to you saying, oh, you're better than that. Don't let them put you down. It will cause you to hear offenses. It will cause you to hear somebody else putting you down. That's its only job, and it does it well. So you start defending yourselves right? You get a little attitude behind what you're talking. You say, well, you just offended me or something. That spirit speaks into you and bolsters these type thoughts. They're not your thoughts. They only become your thoughts if you act upon them. These are, in fact, communications, and that spirit piggybacks everybody it can. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or non-Christian. I'm telling you right now, it's there. If you're in the flesh, you have to deal with it. The Lord is saying, the Lord just said, when you're bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room. Why? It says, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee, that you and him come and say to you, give this man place, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. Can you all see this unending cycle? When you come into anything, doesn't matter if it's a conversation, helping someone do something. How many times have you gentlemen out there, right? And you ladies, you have gone through this scenario I'm about to describe. You're doing something. You could be fixing something. You could be doing something in the yard. You could be in the kitchen doing something. But there's been moments in your life where you have come in and you say, hey, let me help you. I know how to do that, right? And so you're offering your best help is what you're doing, right? And then somebody else behind you comes in and says, no, you're doing it the wrong way. Let me show you how to really do it. And then what happens is you feel instantly put down, like your idea was crud, and somebody else comes in. You begin to analyze what they're doing, and you instantly begin to say, it's not going to work. It's almost like a triggered response you start giving. You're thinking in your mind, that's not going to work. You may even say to them, I don't think that's going to work. And you start arguing to support your idea over theirs. And still yet, in some cases, somebody else will come in and say, none of you know what you're talking about. Do it this way. So you always have people entering, right? Taking the higher position, putting everybody else down. And what do you have at the end of all of that? You have arguments. You have hurt feelings, don't you? All of this begins by a person coming in, taking the upper level, right? Sitting themselves above everybody else. And the Lord is saying, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't come in and take over something, right? Get that out of your spirit. That's what the world teaches you. The world teaches you to prove yourself to other people. The Lord tells you, don't ever do that. The world's teaching is opposite the Messiah's teaching, right? Or it goes further than that. So you guys pretty much have that. Let's continue. He says this, when you are bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room. This is Luke 14:10. Go sit in the lowest room. That when he that bade thee cometh, when the one who called you arrives, he may say unto you, friend, go up higher. Then, Jesus says, then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. Then you'll have worship, a celebration with those who are also called like you are. For whosoever, this is a principle, both spiritual and practical. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased. You guys know what abased means? That means to be brought low. Whoever exalts himself, right? To exalt yourself means you're presenting yourself as some qualified individual. You know what? For example, in presentations that Pastor Paul puts together, right? And if I speak on there, do you guys know I will never listen to anybody else's presentation on there because I will not enter into competition. I will not do that. I will be supportive. I want to be authentic, so I don't want anything, not one thing, right? To dovetail what anybody else has said, but I want to support them by the small truth that I have, so that their truth can be larger, because I already give them that front row seat, right? I tend to take that lowest position with the smaller details. I don't need to take front row. I need to assist and help. Now, that's not, you may say, well, talking about it makes a person sound like they're trying to be better than everybody else. That's not the case. The point is, when you start to live by this principle, you do not want to take the front row because you already understand somebody is there always. That's why I seek to assist. I don't seek to take the charge of anybody, but I seek to assist. A person who will assist another is always in the back. A person who leads the charge, they're in the front. I don't lead the charge. I assist. That's what I do. That's why I use that word assist all the time. I take the back seat. Now, when you take the back seat, then your assistance becomes useful. The worst thing you could ever do in your life is to attempt to lead the charge and then find out you led people to slaughter, or you ruined something in their lives because you took charge and you did not have all the qualifications for that role, right? I've learned that a long time ago, a very harsh way. So now I take the back seat and I seek to assist in truth anybody who would fall behind and needs my help. Something happened. You couldn't quite fit in. But my point is this. People normally find COT after they have already found hundreds of other ministries. We're like the last on the totem pole. So funny, right? But it's the tail end of the boat is where we're at. We're at the back end of the boat, right? We're certainly not at the front of the boat. Try not to use naval terms here. Nobody understands that jargon. But when you take the back, when you take the lesser role, that's when you're exalted in life. That happens in your homes. It does. Couples, that among you too. I'm telling you right now, if two people, husband and wife, took the lesser role, they would have nothing but joy in their relationship. That's why people can date forever. Why do you think that people can date and have such a good time, but as soon as they get married, it all goes down the toilet, doesn't it? Why? I'll tell you why. Because when you're dating, you really try to assist. You willingly take the back seat because you're trying to really assist the other person. Some people may try to win the other person over, but you're trying to assist the other person. Therefore, you do small things out of love, small silly things out of love. And when two people do that together, they have nothing but joy. When they get married, here's what happens. Somebody says, well, I have to be the head and not the tail. And so they start taking charge of everything. They're no longer assisting. They're commanding. And then both sides try to command the other. Arguments start. Pressure builds in the house, right? All this stuff starts to happen. Why? Because two people are trying to lead the household, and most often against one another, especially when you're young. Because the woman thinks she knows best. She'll express that. The man thinks he knows best. And if you step on each other's toes, both are put down. And it creates a negative atmosphere. So imagine what would happen if two people got married. And the husband, knowing his role, took the low end, right, of things and sought to assist the wife in doing things in the house. But that the wife took the humble route also and sought to assist the male. You know what you would have? You would have two people trying to outlove one another in the greatest joy they ever experienced. That's what you would have. Have you noticed that when somebody tries to take leadership over something, that's when the confusion starts? But look how it operates in freedom, voluntarily, and with love. And the spirit of love is surely here. So it makes it almost like a home type of environment with the Lord, but with love. Because no one's trying to tell somebody how they ought to be. All of it's voluntary. You guys will hear me say, well, how you should be living. I don't do that. I don't do that. You know what? I learned a long time ago that if you force a person to do something, you provoke that person, and that's also taking that high position of authority again. And a lot of people, they get crazy with authority. When you experience authority over other men, that's when you really find that the position of humility is greatly needed for leadership. In fact, Leadership is a quality of assisting everybody. That's what leadership is. You guys have this though, right? So, for whosoever, this is a principle, if you exalt yourself, you're going to be brought down low. And whoever it is that humbles himself shall be exalted. If you take the lesser role to assist people in genuineness, now never take the low position because you want to be exalted. That's being divisive. Don't do that. Right now, hear me carefully. Don't try to be humble so that you can be blessed. Don't try to be humble so that you can gain something. That's not humility. Humility is when you take the assisted role. You try to assist others. You have a genuine, heartfelt desire to assist other folks. That's the only way you can humble yourself. A lot of people think that humbling yourself means to hold your tongue and to act like you're taking the lesser role. That's hypocrisy, because what normally happens, a person who will attempt to humble themselves based on this weird theology in the world, they'll be quiet, put their head down, and then it's only a matter of time before they blow up. They blow up. And everything comes out of their mouth. Well, I stood here and I've heard this long, and I've tried to stay quiet, and I've tried this. And they start yelling and throwing a tantrum. That's hypocrisy. That's not humbling yourself. To really humble yourself is to really have a desire to assist those you have placed above you. That's humbling yourself. Humbling yourself is to change the way you live, not to hide what you really have inside for a moment. That's not humility. Humility is a lifestyle. Somebody asked a question, how do I help my spouse, right? Other than prayer, listen to me. Humility is a big part of it. When you seek to assist, which you have by asking the question, when you seek to assist somebody else with real humility, because that is humility. When you watch to assisting, have that heartfelt desire to assist, right? Be careful of one thing. Be careful not to guide the person like a horse. Don't do that. And what I mean by that is sometimes you can want a person to get well so quickly, you'll find yourself taking control of their decisions. And you'll try to steer them in the right direction so they can hurry up and get healed based on what you see and what you know. But if you take the seat of humility and you seek to assist the person, pray that the Lord open your eyes to the situation first, right? So that you will be able to truly assist in truthful matters, not in something fictitious that you may think is right, right? Take the lower seat and exalt your spouse. Lift up your spouse. That's the beginning of it. Lift up your spouse. Don't lift your spouse up in false things. That's not lifting anybody up. When you lift somebody up falsely, that's setting them up. That's not lifting them up. But lift them up. Compliment the good inside of them. If they're struggling with something, right? You can sit quiet with them while they struggle, but assure them that you're there. Continue to pray, and then if they do something good, then assist them in the goodness that they do. Light has no fellowship with darkness. It means it's impossible for righteousness to ever be evil, and it's impossible for evil to ever be righteousness, right? That means a person, every single person on this earth, was born in death or the darkness, and we're being drawn to the marvelous light. That means we still have residue of darkness on us. So I do not compliment the darkness in a person, but I compliment the good in a person. I'm not scared away by the darkness in anybody. I'm not. Darkness is there regardless. It's going to be there. Somebody's, people have darkness in them or they wouldn't have to hold their tongue. But you don't have to compliment the darkness. So when your spouse is doing something in goodness, compliment it. You don't take part of the negativity, the darkness that they have in them. That's when you pray. When a person is entertaining darkness, they're in bondage. That's when you pray. Compliment the good in them. I know lots of people, and some of them have done some awful things. And I don't care what they have done in the realm of darkness. I do care what they do in the realm of goodness. Does that make sense? I am aware that everybody has done something they're not proud of. And in my life, I say, so what? So what? I understand that everybody has done something. Maybe you did something yesterday. But the Lord didn't put me here to compliment anything that you have done wrong, nor to echo out what you have done wrong. He put me here first to be saved, to compliment my brothers and sisters in what they do right, and encourage them in righteousness. That's how you have no fellowship with darkness. You don't entertain it, nor lift darkness up. That means, and that's why some people used to get mad at me, because I will not practice vengeance. And people would get mad at me for not getting other people back for what they said, somewhere. I'm not doing that. No, that's darkness. Just like the Lord's teaching in Luke 14:7 through Luke 14:11. That is a teaching, that is a very interesting and important teaching of a principle. These are one of the principles of Christ. You guys hear me talk about principles of Christ, right? Here's one of them. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased. That's a principle of Christ. And he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Now again, humbling yourself is not something you can just instantly turn on. It is the way you agree to live. Because humbling yourself is not covering up the darkness. Humbling yourself is purging the darkness. And a lot of people think that to humble yourself, you just instantly, you be quiet and you act like you've done nothing wrong. That's hypocrisy. That's simple restraint. That's not humility. True humility is in the way you live. And when you take that back seat to assist, that lower portion of things to assist, I'm telling you, that's where the richness is. That's where it is. The richness is there. Do you guys see the difference? Because the world just simply does not teach this. They teach the opposite. Indeed, they teach us to survive. You have to take control. That's what the world teaches. To survive, you have to take control. That's not the truth. It's not the truth. Listen, the Lord has called you out of the world. That means he didn't call you away from earth. He called you out of the ways of the world and how the world lives. In other words, how flesh lives. The world is equated to the ways of flesh. That's what it equals, the ways of flesh. That's what the world equals, flesh. So hopefully you understand that now. To die to your flesh daily is to die to the world daily. And the Bible says, love not the world. It also says, those who love the world have the enmity of God. You know what enmity is? That's angry separation, bitter separation. So whoever loves this world is bitterly separated from the living God. You cannot love the world like that. Because if you love it says, those who do love the world like that, right? Those are the same ones who entertain the darkness and are part of it because they do like it. In other words, the only way you can stay in the world is if you love it. You will end up with what you love. Unlike your relationship history in the world, you're going to end up with what you love spiritually. This is a very important principle to help answer part of that question of this morning. Whosoever will exalt himself will be abased, will be brought down low. So if you're in a situation and you want to assist someone, and you really, listen, to assist someone is not to have your way. work in their lives. But when you really want a victory in somebody's life, I tell you that you're willing to have all patience so they can have that victory. Somebody says, so when someone speaks negatively on themselves, we should ignore it and lift up and edify the light. Listen, I'll say it again. I have been around the deadliest people in the world, plus the darkest folks in the world, right? I've been around both. It is a difficult thing to be around folks who are so dark and so deadly. And they speak in ways you wouldn't permit anyone to speak around you. But I'm not here to echo darkness. I'm not here to speak the words of darkness. I think we all did that prior to coming to Christ. I will compliment and assist the good in a person, assist the righteousness in a person. I will never assist darkness. And when someone speaks against themselves, right? When they're sitting there talking against themselves, they're having a conversation with something deep within. I tell you, if you start to interfere, they're going to let you know you have no placement in that conversation. Normally, when a person does this, when they start putting themselves down, you have to have discernment in this also, because sometimes when a person puts themselves down and they're in sorrow, they want someone to stop them from what they're saying. They need reassurance that they matter is what they need. Oftentimes, people will feel like they don't matter. And believe me, that's a terrible thing to ever feel. Right? That's very terrible. In fact, that's at the crux of individuals who are near to that line of really wanting to get rid of themselves from the world, when they feel they don't matter to anybody. But as a child of the living God, you know they matter. And so state that to them. Tell them that. Reassure them of that as many times as it takes, gentlemen. A lot of men out there, you don't like to reaffirm things with a woman. And women, you do the same thing to the gentleman. Well, they live with me for 5 years. They should know that. No, stop doing that. It is so easy to repetitiously compliment somebody in the good that they're doing, to reassure them that your love is still there. And sometimes we have great issues with this because we're still keeping standards of darkness. Remember something. The world teaches by way of men. They have borrowed things from the Bible, mixed it with their own philosophies, and they do teach people by their ways. But the Lord called us by a higher standard, a true standard, a standard of life, not a standard of death. And so if you adopt the ways, the principles of Christ in your life, you'll be a vessel of life, L-I-F-E, so that when someone is contemplating death, your presence will change the entire conversation. You're a vessel of life, L-I-F-E. So number one, you're never going to compliment the speech of death. Your very presence will begin to alter someone's emotional state towards death. You'll shine much brighter. You will. And people will notice that shine in you. They will. Compliment the good in somebody. I found that a person can speak negative all day. And if you compliment them in love, in that small portion of their lives, it can really make a difference. It can make a difference. It can make a big difference. But never want, listen, folks, hear me on this, please. When you're trying to find out where somebody's mind is, you're already making a mistake. You do know that, right? When you try to find out, well, where's this person coming from? You've already made a mistake. Because now you're plotting. Can you all see that? You're plotting. You guys remember when Jesus perceived the thoughts of those around him? You remember that? And he said, why are you trying to kill me? Remember, the Holy Spirit is a discerner of the thoughts in the heart of man. So it knows the thoughts in the heart of man, right? If you're trying to figure somebody out, you're trying to plot to insert something into their lives, and that is not how you operate. That's still, that method is a way of the world. That's still you having control. Can you all see that? When you can, because I could easily go rogue and read people. They call it reading people, right? I can read people, but that's manipulation. If I read a person to try and get them to change course, whether it look good, whatever the case is, maybe everybody perceives it as good, it is still manipulation. That is not truth. When you communicate in truth, when you edify the good in somebody, you realize something. Number one, that person has to make their own choices. You don't have control over that person's life, right? You didn't give birth to that person. That person is your spouse, not your child. That person is your brother, not your child, right? So you don't do that. You assist the good in that person, which means they can speak 12 hours about death. But the moment they say, I wish I had a better life, then that's where you step in and say, you know what, you can. You can. Stand ready to compliment the speech of life in someone, because everybody speaks that language. They may not speak it often, but they will. But you have to have patience. When somebody is speaking death all the time, they're crying out. When a baby cries, what do? First, you have to find out what they're crying about. But in order to find out what they're crying about, you have to have a special language. A mother has an insight to that baby. She can tell the difference between the little cries. But the mother did not give herself that understanding. God implanted that understanding in that woman for the sake of that child. That's why women have to feel their environment. Because if they could not feel their environment, they would not be good mothers of children. Women can discern emotions. They can always tell when something is wrong. That's why you guys get frustrated. How did she know that? She's not supposed to know. I went to the hardware store when I told her I was going to go get some chewing gum. Chewing gum, listen to me, nobody uses that term anymore. When I said I was going to go get some groceries or something, right? Women have an insight on feeling. Ladies, a caution to you. The Lord has given you great insight into flesh. Don't let flesh speak to you. He gave you the gift of discerning emotions, things of the flesh. Stop listening to it. That's for babies. You listen to flesh when a baby is crying, not from adults. That was Eve's mistake. Satan could not communicate with Adam because Adam was not going to listen to anything the serpent had to say. Eve is the one that listened to her flesh because the serpent speaks by way of your flesh. The serpent cannot speak in that realm of light, but he can speak to your flesh all the time. Please understand that. I know everybody has their theories and their ways and this, that, and the other, but listen, folks, I'm trying to tell you because I do not suffer from anger and bitterness and all this stuff people suffer with. I don't suffer with that. I don't sit around sorrowful and all these things. I do not. There is a heavy burden on me, yes it is, for the sakes of those in the world that are dying, that are being corrupted. The children and all these things that are happening, is that a great burden? Yes, it is. It's a burden of the heart. I am by no means depressed. I don't need to have control over my own emotions because I walk in the Spirit. And if you walk in the Spirit, it is the power of Christ that commands you in your body. God will never grant my flesh power over me because I walk in the Spirit. Now, if I walk in the flesh, it already has power over me. So I lose control. I lose control because you never have it. The flesh does. That's a constant war, a constant fight. But if you step into Christ to relinquish control, then it's under his authority. And by the way, God has given the Son all authority, just so you know.